Hey everybody, my name is Pi. I'm one of the co-founders as well as the managing editor for srlounge.com. If you guys are like me, then when you hear the term HDR photography, you might just cringe a bit. HDR photography has gotten a really bad rap in recent years, and this is because on almost a daily basis, we hop online, see lots of HDR photograph examples that are basically over-processed, they look candied, and very much have an unnatural feel to them that really screams, "I've been photoshopped." But the truth is, it's tough to find fault with these over-processed HDR photographs because up until this point, there hasn't been enough high-quality educational materials teaching the subject of professional HDR photography. That is, until now. The SR Lounge HDR Photography Workshop on DVD is a 13-hour course that's designed to be the standard in HDR education. Interestingly enough, the subject of HDR photography in recent years has really become a household term, but the actual techniques that go into creating an HDR photograph are indeed nothing new. Photographers have been trying to create high dynamic range images that capture all of the details in the shadows, all of the detail in the highlights within one single image, well, pretty much for as long as photography itself has been around. Our goal in this workshop on DVD is to teach you that HDR photography, when used appropriately and with the right techniques, can create stunningly beautiful and realistic imagery. At this point, many of you might be under the impression that creating an HDR photograph is as simple as dialing in your auto exposure bracketing settings in camera. But there's so much more involved. In fact, every single scene requires a specific approach and special considerations depending on the challenges within that scene, not only from the shooting side, but also from the processing side. In this workshop on DVD, we're going to be working through 25 full examples from start to finish, discussing all of these considerations when shooting as well as when processing these images. Single shot HDR is a term that we started using a few years back, basically to describe the process of trying to capture as much tonal information as possible within a single raw image. The intent is basically to take this image into post-production and use it to either create a bracketed sequence to process as a bracketed HDR photo, or to use it for a single shot faux HDR image. Now, basically using this process, we're able to create amazing panoramic HDR images that would be otherwise difficult or near impossible to capture using standard bracketing techniques. Learning how to process an HDR sequence is just as important a skill as learning how to correctly capture the source images. That's why in this DVD we traveled throughout the southwestern United States to capture beautiful images in a whole variety of different scenes and scenarios. Once we get them into processing, we discuss each of the challenges and the approaches in how to resolve and come out with the best photograph when it comes to processing your images. We have included all of the source raw files for each of the 25 images that we'll be creating in this workshop on DVD. This DVD has been designed for amateur and professional photographers alike, and it features a convenient playback menu with a full chapter and video listing. This means that if you reach a certain point where you feel like you have a sufficient understanding of one topic, you can quickly navigate to a different portion on the DVD with just a simple click. The video files are also, of course, included, and if you feel like it, you can also load these into a video player of your choice and watch that way as well. We're going to be using Lightroom 4 as our raw processor, we're going to be using Photomatix for our HDR processing, and we're going to be using Photoshop for basically our layer blending and retouch. But keep in mind that what we're teaching in this course is not so much the software itself, but rather the techniques that we use to create these HDR images. And this means that if you guys have a different raw processor, let's say that you prefer Aperture, or you prefer Capture One, or Adobe Camera Raw, you can use these raw processors in place of Lightroom. Let's say you like to use a different HDR processing software instead of Photomatix. Let's say, for example, you use NIK HDR effects. That's totally fine as well. And in Photoshop, we're going to be doing very basic layering and retouch, which can basically be done with any version of Photoshop, or you can even be using Photoshop elements as well. So while the sliders and settings may vary if you're using different pieces of software, you can still use these techniques to arrive at the same results. The most important thing is that you choose the piece of software for each portion of our processing workflow that best fits your own preferences and your own workflow. Thank you all so much for watching this video. We know that you're absolutely going to love the HDR Photography Workshop on DVD by SR Lounge. And in no time, you guys are going to be creating awe-inspiring HDR images, which I would love if you would share with us. We'll see you guys next time.